$21 billion. That's how much the Walt Disney Company was worth when its founder passed away, adjusting for inflation. And if we look at the company today, it's valued at over $180 billion, with theme parks spanning across multiple continents, movies that have generated tens of billions at the box office, and a streaming service that competes with the biggest names in entertainment. But none of this would exist if it weren't for a young farm boy who grew up drawing animals in a small town in Missouri. A boy who would face bankruptcy multiple times before creating an empire that would change entertainment forever. Walter Elias Disney was born on the 5th of December, 1901 in Chicago, Illinois. His father, Elias Disney, was a strict man who believed in hard work above all else. Elias had tried his hand at many businesses, from construction to running a small farm, but none of them seemed to work out the way he hoped. When Walt was just 4 years old, his father moved the family to a farm in Marceline, Missouri, hoping that farm life would provide the stability and income they desperately needed. It was here in Marceline where young Walt Disney would spend some of the most formative years of his life. The farm wasn't easy on anyone in the Disney family. Elias was a harsh taskmaster who expected his sons to work long hours before and after school. Walt and his older brother Roy would wake up at 3:30 in the morning to help with farm chores, delivering newspapers in freezing weather, and doing whatever else their father demanded of them. Elias rarely showed affection and believed that idle hands were the devil's workshop. So he kept his children constantly busy, despite the grueling work schedule. Walt found joy in the simplest things. He would spend whatever free time he had, drawing pictures of the farm animals around him, the horses, the pigs, the chickens. All of them became subjects for his crude sketches. He didn't have formal training, and his family certainly didn't have money for art supplies, but that didn't stop him from pursuing what he loved. One of Walt's earliest memories was being paid to draw a picture of a neighbor's horse. It was just a nickel, but to young Walt, it felt like a fortune. It was the first time someone had valued his art enough to pay for it, and that feeling would stay with him for the rest of his life. However, life on the farm was hard, and Elias Disney was struggling to make ends meet after suffering from typhoid fever. Elias could no longer handle the physical demands of farm work. So in 1911, he sold the farm and moved the family to Kansas City. Missouri and Kansas City. Elias bought a newspaper delivery route and once again put his sons to work. Walt and Roy were responsible for delivering papers every morning before school, often in brutal weather conditions. Walt would later describe these years as some of the hardest of his childhood. He was exhausted all the time, falling asleep in class and struggling to keep up with his schoolwork. But even during these difficult times, Walt found ways to nurture his love for drawing. He would sketch in the margins of his school books, and whenever he had a spare moment, he would create little cartoons to entertain himself and his classmates. When Walt was in high school, he took night courses at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts. He was determined to improve his skills and turn his passion into something more than just a hobby. He also became the cartoonist for his school newspaper, drawing patriotic pictures and cartoons about World War I, which was raging in Europe at the time. Walt was fascinated by the war, and like many young men of his generation, he wanted to be part of it in 1918, when he was just 16 years old. Walt dropped out of high school and lied about his age to join the Red Cross Ambulance Corps. He was sent to France, where he spent a year driving ambulances and drawing cartoons for the other soldiers. When Walt returned to America in 1919, he was determined to pursue a career as an artist. He moved back to Kansas City and got a job at a commercial art studio called Pesman Rubin Art Studio. It was here that Walt met a young artist named Ub Iwerks, who would become one of his closest collaborators and friends. The two of them shared a passion for animation, which was still a relatively new and experimental art form at the time. Walt was fascinated by the idea that drawings could move and tell stories, and he became obsessed with learning everything he could about the animation process. Walt and Ub started their own commercial art company, but it failed. Within a month, they simply didn't have enough clients to sustain the business. Undeterred, Walt got a job at the Kansas City Film Ad Company, where he created primitive animated advertisements for local businesses. It was here that Walt really began to understand the mechanics of animation. He would spend hours experimenting with different techniques, reading everything he could find about animation and practicing. Constantly, he borrowed a camera from work and set up a small studio in his garage where he created his first animated shorts in 1922. Walt founded his first animation company called Laugh-O-Gram Studio. He hired a small team of animators, including his friend UB Works, and they began producing short animated fairy tales that they sold to local theaters. The cartoons were well received, and for a brief moment, it seemed like Walt had finally found success. But Walt was a terrible businessman. At this stage of his life, he was so focused on making quality animations that he neglected the financial side of the business. He paid his employees more than the company could afford, and he took on projects that cost more to produce than they would ever earn. Laugh-O-Gram Studio went bankrupt in 1923, leaving Walt broke and discouraged. Most people would have given up at this point, but Walt Disney was not most people. He had a dream, and he wasn't going to let failure stop him with just $40 in his pocket. Walt bought a one-way train ticket to Hollywood, California. His brother Roy was already living there, recovering from tuberculosis in a veterans hospital, and Walt figured that Hollywood, with its booming film industry, might offer him the opportunities that Kansas City couldn't. Walt arrived in Hollywood with nothing but a suitcase full of clothes and an unfinished animated film he had been working on. He was 21 years old and completely unknown. Walt tried to get a job as a director at a film studio, but no one would hire him. They told him he lacked experience and that animation was just a novelty that would never become a serious art form. Frustrated, but not defeated, Walt decided to start his own studio. Once again, he convinced Roy to become his business partner, and together they scraped together enough money to rent a small office space in the back of a real estate office. They called their new venture the Disney Brothers Studio. Walt's first big break came when he secured a deal with a New York distributor to produce a series of animated shorts featuring a character he created called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. The Oswald cartoons were a hit, and for the first time in his life, Walt was making decent money and gaining recognition in the industry. But once again, disaster struck. When Walt traveled to New York to negotiate a better contract with his distributor, he discovered that the distributor had gone behind his back and hired away most of his animators. Not only that, but the distributor owned the rights to Oswald, which meant Walt had no legal claim to the character he had created. Walt returned to Hollywood, devastated. He had lost his character, his animators, and his distribution deal. It seemed like his career was over before it had really begun. But on the train ride back to California, Walt began sketching a new character, a mouse that he initially wanted to call Mortimer. His wife, Lillian, whom he had married in 1925, suggested the name Mickey instead, and Mickey Mouse was born. Walt poured everything he had into creating cartoons featuring Mickey Mouse. The first two Mickey Mouse cartoons, Plain Crazy and The Gallopin' Gaucho, failed to find a distributor, but Walt refused to give up. He decided to take a huge gamble on his third Mickey Mouse cartoon called Steamboat Willie. Walt had read about a new technology called synchronized sound, which allowed sound effects and music to be perfectly timed with the action on screen. Most cartoons at the time were silent, and Walt believed that adding sound would make his cartoons stand out. Producing Steamboat Willie with synchronized sound was incredibly expensive and risky. Walt had to mortgage everything he owned to finance it. But when Steamboat Willie premiered in New York on November 18, 1928, it was an instant sensation. Audiences had never seen anything like it. The combination of animation humor and synchronized sound was revolutionary. Steamboat Willie made Mickey Mouse a star and established Walt Disney as a major player in the animation industry. Throughout the 1930s, Walt continued to innovate and push the boundaries of what animation could do. He created the Silly Symphonies series, which allowed his animators to experiment with color music and storytelling techniques. In 1932, Walt released Flowers and Trees, which was the first cartoon made in full color using the new Technicolor process. It won the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film, the first of many Oscars that Disney would win over his career. But Walt wasn't satisfied with just making short cartoons. He had a much bigger vision. He wanted to create a full-length animated feature film, something that had never been done before. Everyone in Hollywood thought he was crazy. They called his project Disney's Folly and predicted it would bankrupt him. Producing a feature-length animated film would require hundreds of animators working for years and would cost an enormous amount of money. But Walt believed in his vision, and he was willing to risk everything to make it happen in 1937 after 4 years of production and at a cost of nearly $1